here we are, with actual actors, a moderate special effects budget, and several low-level X-Men. None of the big ones, though. We gotta save something for Phase 2.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. This is going to be my full review video of Deadpool 2. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, just careful for spoilers. We'll be talking about very specific details, Easter eggs, cameos, everything. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the Marvel videos. There'll be giveaway stuff that I'll explain at the end of the video too. So starting it off, I'll just have to say, far and away, love this movie more than I love the first movie. One of those examples of a sequel that winds up being better than the original movie. They found a way to market us this giant big team-up movie, give us a little bit of that, while at the same time subverting that expectation and keeping it small and intimate like the first Deadpool movie. Just the main ones. One of my favorite lines after everybody crashes after they parachute out of the back of the plane. So this film parodies sequels in as much as it parodies itself, as well as the X-Men franchise and every other big comic book franchise there is. Part of the fun for me is trying to pick out Easter eggs and pop culture jokes when I go to see things, so obviously this was wall-to-wall pop culture jokes. There were a couple moments when you could definitely tell they swapped in some joke changes at the last minute. Anytime where he's wearing his mask doing a one-liner is probably something that they changed later in the edit. They said that Ryan Reynolds was sending them new jokes in post-production right up until the last day. So they were kind of stuck with some of the jokes that they set up pretty early, like the Frozen Yentl joke, "Papa, can you hear me?" and that they later paid off at the end of the film as he was slowly going out. Some of that was in service of the emotional through line, the whole idea that Deadpool and Vanessa wanted to start a family, that they then later spun into the F word, which is basically the X-Force team. Family is an F word, so I feel like they did a better job of that than they did in the first film, while at the same time cranking all the jokes up, and you could definitely tell they spent a lot more money on the special effects. Fire Fist, Negasonic, they spent more money to do the X-Jet. They flew that around a lot more than they did in the first film. They had all those special cameos from the X-Men members, so I do think they did a really good job with the Infinity War of it all, just talking about like the really big, crazy, say like Wakanda-style battles when everything just goes nuts on screen. They found a way to still make that funny, especially the parachute scene when everybody's powers are going off, especially working in jokes like The Vanisher, where you're like, what the hell is Brad Pitt doing in this movie? Oh, very clearly they added him at the last minute, but it was such a great moment. Seriously, one of the jokes that they considered instead of doing The Vanisher was actually having Chris Evans' Fantastic Four Human Torch character come to audition for the team. The Vanisher was the joke that they ended up landing on because they could just put anybody they wanted to in post-production when he landed on the wires. Speaking of CG characters, we have to talk about the Juggernaut. If you guys didn't know, it's a completely motion capture character just like Colossus, but it's actually Ryan Reynolds himself doing the voice of the Juggernaut. But I thought they did a really good job of CG creature versus CG creature when you have his battle with Colossus. And they gave Colossus a real arc too. He actually feels like much more of a buddy than Cable does, which is like one of the things that was weird about the film to me, in that Cable is supposed to be such a big character going forward. 5-picture contract that Josh Brolin signed. They have an arc for him planned through 4 films. I don't know what that 5th film is going to wind up being. But he's such a huge character, I felt like they would double down on him and Cable a little bit more than they actually did. But they did say that they bumped up the Cable in the movie during the reshoots. There apparently was way less Cable before they did that. So I think the scenes that they added later in post-production were him with Weasel, the stuff with him by himself looking at the techno-organic virus. There's that moment where he's staring into the mirror and it looks kind of like he's in pain or he's worried. He's not really sure what he's going to look like in a couple years because the virus is getting worse. The writers did say that they would address that in future sequels. Obviously, X-Force, Deadpool 3. There have been jokes, like they make a lot of jokes during the film about future sequels. Why don't we just skip the 3rd one? There's no point in doing it. Like they joke that they'll skip to Deadpool 4 instead of doing Deadpool 3. So everybody that's talked about it has said that the lawyers will not let them talk to the Marvel people. The writers of the Deadpool movie have actually tried to contact Kevin Feige, but I think Ryan Reynolds and crew have such a great ship running that they're not going to try and mess with that too much once they are under Kevin Feige's banner. But a lot of you are wondering about the X-Force of it all. So one of the biggest complaints that I saw on my non-spoilery review after people had started to see it internationally was that they were expecting something more from the X-Force team-up because it was billed as Deadpool and X-Force, so people just expected it to be a straight-up superhero sequel team-up movie. And the funny thing is I think that we should not have been surprised by how they pulled the rug out from under us with those characters, because Deadpool is meant to subvert superhero movie tropes. In him forming a super duper group that was very derivative, per Domino's comment, of the X-Men team, just felt like a trope, so it was obviously the setup for a big punchline that was them all dying while they were parachuting down. The pace of the movie did slow down a little bit after that big opening scene, so actually we should talk about the opening credits too. In the same way that the first movie did funny opening credits that weren't really opening credits, second movie did the exact same thing. It was more of a James Bond opening. If you're not a big James Bond movie fan, just watch like the first 10 minutes of one of those movies and you'll see what I'm talking about. But the Logan call-out was great. There was so much Hugh Jackman in this film, even though he himself was nowhere to be found. All of the Hugh Jackman that you saw during that post-credit scene was just footage from the original Wolverine Origins movie. They just cut it in a really funny way to work Deadpool in so it looked like it was new footage of him. Just cleaning up the timelines. I'll post a link to my post-credit scene video at the end of this, because probably one of the best comic book post-credit scenes of all time, especially considering that Infinity War just happened and we got that bombshell of a post-credit scene. They have more of a serious moment with a little bit of comedy in it. Deadpool is obviously all for comedy. There were a couple jokes that didn't quite land as well as I thought they could have. They drug his death scene at the end of the film on just a little longer than I expected them to. I was expecting a little more of a smash cut to speed through Cable using his time turner to go back and save him. And because of what he does with time travel at the end of the film, a lot of people are like, hey, wait a minute, how does this change the timeline of the film? So just assume that Vanessa will be alive when we get to the next Deadpool movie and Peter, but nobody else as far as we know. People always get really worked up about the rules of time travel because if Cable and Deadpool prevented Fire Fist from becoming the villain in the future and his family was saved, wouldn't then Cable never have come back in the first place? So wouldn't he just vanish in front of their eyes? But he stays there. So if Cable didn't vanish, then just assume relatively fluid time travel rules, meaning that Vanessa can be alive and Peter can be alive after the post-credit scenes, while at the same time, the events of them putting X-Force together and those members dying can stick, so that when we get to Drew Goddard's X-Force later this year, he can pick whichever team members that he wants. The music was great, even though they didn't have Junkie XL. It was Tyler Bates doing the score. They had that funny Juggernaut song. That was probably one of the funnier Easter eggs within the universe, because just listen to the lyrics for a second here. Holy shit balls. And then there were all the jokes about dubstep and then the dubstep music they used in the film when they were fighting. There were a couple moments when Cable wasn't quite as funny as I felt like he could have been, so I feel like they need to tweak that a little bit for the X-Force movie and any Deadpool sequels, because he's funnier when he's not telling jokes, and I felt like they tried to give him too many actual jokes. Deadpool is meant to be the one to do all the wisecracking that Cable reacts to, but the problem is that Colossus already does that, so you have this weird group dynamic with Cable in there, so they just need to tune that a little bit because you have two big strong guys. Although I love the way they make fun of the fact that Cable is not as tall as comic book Cable. Deadpool specifically calls that out during the film. 5'11", not big like comic book Cable. So it was hilarious at the end of the film when you see them all walking into frame, tallest to shortest. So you have Colossus, then Deadpool, who's a little bit shorter, then Josh Brolin's Cable, who's a lot shorter than Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool. So they're like this weird Russian nesting doll. And speaking of Russian jokes, I did like the actual jokes that they gave for Colossus to tell, because he has funny moments and then there are actually genuine jokes that he tells. That's how we do it in Mother Russia. And then he drops an F-bomb for Deadpool. He jams the wire up Juggernaut's butt, then pushes him into the pool. So I love Colossus so much more than I loved him in the first film. I was a big fan of the first film, that should be clear, but I think that all the characters were better in the sequel. There were a couple of minor funny cameo moments. You may have spotted Matt Damon and Alan Tudyk when Cable first ported into the past. They were the rednecks who Cable stole the car from. So let me know in the comments, what did you think about the film? What did you think about some of the funnier cameos and the jokes? Obviously, I'll do an Easter egg video when I'll talk about all the specific cameos. A lot of people are still wondering about where Stan Lee was in the film. There is a new round of that Black Panther Blu-ray giveaway. All you have to do to enter, just be a subscriber and leave a comment on the video. I'll name a winner when I post that Easter egg video tomorrow. But click here for the post-credit scene and click here for that brand new Infinity War Eternal scene. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.